Welcome to the end of all things. We have our cute little table of contents. I don't know why. Presentation, that's why. This document was made possible by the tireless contributions and assistance from many in my chat, including, in no particular order, Can't Close Vim, Docs, Rhodeezy, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it, Punished Fury, Tick Brady, Cyber Vegan, on our wonderful champion effort poster of the subreddit, Wannabe Sad Boy. The beginning. It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your front door. You step onto the road. If you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. From Bilbo Baggins, from The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. I was a streamer on Twitch TV for 3,943 days, from June 6th, 2011 till March 23rd, 2022. In that time, I've been a StarCraft 2 ladder hero, a StarCraft 2 semi-pro turned entertainment streamer, the most popular Twitch streamer for about a year, an aspiring League of Legends player, variety game entertainer, finally an online political pundit. Before Twitch, I streamed on Twitch's predecessor, Justin TV. Before that, I streamed on livestream.com and ustream.tv before streaming was even an established medium. I am many things have been said about me. I'm obnoxiously abrasive, oftentimes far too hyperbolic, and can be annoyingly offensive. Can also be incredibly passionate, fiercely driven, sometimes even considerate to a fault. Do not consider myself to be nice, but I am kind. Don't consider myself to be very friendly, but I am, without question, a good friend. This document is vast and encompasses many different topics. By the end of this journey, I will have established the following things: a brief overview, the start and end of my political project on Twitch, a detailed understanding of my transpositions and how they came to be, a comprehensive overview of who I am and who people say I am, the lies spread about me and my community and how they're created, and Vouch's central role in the propagation of malevolence towards me and my community. The birth of Twitch politics. A good quote from a friend of the stream, Albert Einstein. The world, as we have created it, is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. I have quotes for every section, just for you guys, because I know how much you like them. Please type soy for every quote. In the beginning, I've always had an interest in philosophy, science, and politics. Even throughout the early days of my streaming, I'd often venture off into topics completely and totally unrelated to gaming. The discussion of these subjects was always peripheral to gameplay, however, and it wasn't until 2016, the rise of Trump, that I decided to take political discussions a bit more seriously. I thought online political discourse at the time was characterized by a fundamental misunderstanding of what was factually true on both sides of the political discourse. I figured, at the time, perhaps naively, that I could contribute to and shape this dialogue in a more meaningful way to improve the state online discourse. 2016 days of online politics were best characterized by the likes of Armored Skeptic, Thunderfoot, Sargon of Akkad, and the Amazing Atheist. The arguments were rife with what I would later call gamer bro politics, a center-left social ideology with a special disdain for third-wave feminism and LGBT issues. Look at how cute this picture is. The Four Horsemen, guys. Oh, it says the iconoclast at the end. I'm sorry. The political content these figures specialized in was essentially the lampooning the blue-haired, overweight feminist seen screeching in Ben Shapiro Owns College Student compilation videos. In those early days of 2016, no one on Twitch, or the gaming community in general really, was representing left-leaning or progressive social positions, so I decided to toss my hat into the ring. Coming from an aggressively toxic internet background gave me the unique ability to communicate with younger people, gamers, in a language they understood while still representing a distinctly progressive agenda, something that, at that point, was only really talked about by those who were perceived as outsiders, such as Anita Sarkeesian and Brianna Wu. Early days politically on Twitch were rife with racism, sexism, and transphobia. I don't know how much of this I need to prove to show people. We got the try-hard spams, GGX gangs. Oh, we got videos? Oh, wait, hold on.
That's crazy. Oh, wow, look at this Greek shining example of your community right here, Greek. Try hard Try hard God CX waiting room. Shining example.
It was quite the place. These are just screenshots from a lot of random old Twitch streams, Twitch chats. Most stream chats were initially combative against me, as Gamergate politics had taken hold strong in the larger Twitch communities, and it wasn't uncommon that I would receive massive waves of harassment after every panel or debate I participated in. What link is this? Oh, people would always get mad. Destiny said everything is bad except liberalism. Destiny is a commie scum. Destiny wants communism. Liberal, by the way. Oh, this is back when on Twitch, every time somebody called you a liberal, they were actually a conservative insulting you. Now on Twitch, when people call you a liberal, it's because they're a communist. Political, I can't read that word, but, geez. What a world we came from. This harassment included 3 separate visits from the FBI. For some of these links, I just include me talking about things in the past, I guess. So if people click through and they think I'm making shit up, you can see I've talked about this for a while. I don't think we have to watch every single thing I've linked, but 3 separate visits from the FBI. People coordinating messages to send to law enforcement to falsely incriminate me, including cutting up past discussions I've had over a video of me showcasing my Glock in an attempt to make it sound like I'm encouraging people to kill conservatives. I don't know if I've ever posted these messages before, but these were some of the people that would create alts on Reddit to tell people how to spam report me to the FBI. Destiny had said some things a few days ago about bombing a hospital and killing the families of a viewer who he was having issues with. Shortly after, Destiny, who's already in legal trouble and being sued, realized the legal implications of letting his plan to blow up a hospital leak and tried to play it off as a joke. I know most people here are, like Destiny, psychopathic and mentally ill, but if there's any sane people here, I strongly encourage you to report Destiny to the FBI. They will likely SWAT and raid his location as they should, and by reporting this terrorist, you can save lives. You can report him anonymously by phoning this number, or you can submit a report on the FBI's website here. Make sure to include this clip of him threatening to kill the viewer's family, then blow up the hospital. I've already reported him multiple times, as have some of my friends, so Destiny will be inevitably swatted. But if you're not mentally ill, like most Destiny viewers, I encourage you to report him as well, so you can get this freak off the streets before it's too late. Been doxxed multiple times across multiple addresses. I've had people searching for my child's and his mother's address. Multiple DDoSes on both my personal connection and across all of my websites. Tens of thousands of hateful messages across Twitter, including death threats and graphic death and rape depictions of my son. Thousands of hacking attempts across my bank accounts, emails, Reddit accounts, cell phones, and other private media accounts. Investigations into Jewish and Arabic donors in my community. For a time, 4chan was trying to figure out who, Hadri was, who was a donor in my community, where Dan comes from. I think at some point they said I was Jewish. Can we look into this Mr. Mutin figure? He seems to be in a lot of Destiny videos. From what I can tell, he's some guy Destiny shilled to his community. Did Mr. Mutin pay him? Is he also a Jew? His name in the community is Hadri. He's Destiny's biggest donator. Destiny only has truly 4 main guys financing him. The other 100 kids are chump change. The ones I know of are Hadri, Harken, sick, which is a wealthy Jewish guy Destiny did a stream visiting. He's a big Bitcoin investor. Lately, he bought a building and made a big mining facility. Oh, they even link articles and everything of him. Nice job. Oh my God, I didn't even see this link at the bottom. 52 more images. I don't know if I even want to scroll in on this, but yeah, decent amount of time spent trying to figure out who everybody in my community was. People posting images of my house on pull, telling me they were going to show up to where I live. Spam chargebacks across hundreds of credit card donations. Dozens of catfishing attempts to solicit nudes, passwords, or personal information from me. Spam reporting of my YouTube and Twitter account, coordinated by multiple online communities, almost forcing me to quit online politics. I remember a long time ago, I think it was the FBI stuff, and all the spam reporting was stressing me out. I think I took a break from debate and politics. We're not going to listen to this 46-minute video, but I recorded this 4 years ago. Multiple attempts to contact my son via his social media. People sending inappropriate, hateful messages to my mother on Facebook and Twitter. Racist and hateful spam across my donation platforms using stolen credit cards. Racist and hateful brigades across my chat rooms, Discord, and subreddit. I had a leaked dick picture incorporated into a cascading style sheet of a subreddit hosted on official Reddit servers that wasn't removed until I made a Reddit post that reached the #1 spot of r all complaining about it. That was a wild time. Had several communities dedicated to spamming my sponsors and the clients of my sponsors with complaints to get me removed from teams or sponsorships. What a part of the wild ride we've been on. Despite the harassment from others, to the chagrin of the broader Twitch chatting and gaming community, I managed to carve out a decent space for myself doing political content on Twitch. I was the sole occupant of this space for about 2 years before the first wave of Twitch political descendants, Hassan and Irish Laddie, would mutate and slither out of my community. The Chubber and the Chadwick. On December 26th, 2012, I had my second discussion with a shit Reddit Says community member, Ian Kaczynski, known online as Irish Laddie, about feminism, rape culture, and other political and social topics. 2012. Old videos.
Problem is, fundamentally, the problem with
one of my first chats with a good friend of the stream, Ian.
Enthusiastic consent, okay?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
something that we give them.
2012, December. What a blast from the past. Shit Reddit Says was a subreddit of highly active, radical progressive posters who were well known for brigading and harassing other communities across Reddit with what they perceived as anti-LGBT and progressive views. Though they also arguably led the charge to getting the notorious jailbait subreddit and other jailbait-like subreddits banned from Reddit, SRS was eventually neutered effectively by one of the admins. According to ex-CEO Yishan, a large number of their posters were banned due to excessive brigading and harassment even after multiple warnings to moderators. Irish Laddie would go on to have several conversations with me and other members of my community before being ousted for a long-term sexual harassment event that took place in my Discord community. To distance himself from these accusations, he changed his name to Vosh and began a YouTube channel January of 2019. Hassan Piker established himself early on as a frat boy content contributor on his uncle's show, The Young Turks, and eventually would go on to do light pop political commentary videos on The Young Turks Facebook page. He would then try his hand at streaming on Twitch in early 2018, though he'd have difficulty breaking past double-digit viewership until reaching out to me in October 2018 to review a debate of his against Charlie Kirk. Over the next several months, Hassan and I would frequently collaborate across both of our streams and popular Twitch shows, including the Raj Royale and Trainwrecks podcasts. I don't know what clips I chose here for some of this.
I guess these articles must have impressed Chank because he was allowed to adapt the blog
it's just
into
like
a series for TYT University.
Just an explanation of some of the stuff that he did when he went on to work for the Young Turks. Okay. What is this? Hassan Piker destroys viral conservative car rant. Oh, this is a link to one of his Facebook videos. Okay. I never know how much I need to link or source or document because I feel like if I make a claim, you need to have some kind of like backing for it. But maybe I can just say some of this stuff and you just agree with it without sourcing. I don't know. Soy up. I will be I'll be linking a Google Doc to this when I finish, okay? The Great Schism. While I had built a reputation fighting with conservatives and alt-righters across the internet, gaining enough notoriety to be featured across multiple profile pieces on Mother Jones and Slate, as well as mentioned in a New York Times podcast, an article about de-radicalizing alt-righters, why wouldn't I link this here? It really makes you think. I was unaware that I was doing a poor job at establishing a better foundation of thought for the people I was bringing over from far-right extremism. Instead of replacing the extremist mindset of many far-right people with a more rational one, I was simply trading out one extremist far-right mindset for an extremist far-left one. I underestimated the amount of actual communists and socialists in my fan base, foolishly assuming many people were only joking when they'd make comments about it, as I'd always been a social democrat who believed in capitalism with strong government interventions. An uncomfortable turmoil would grow amidst my fans anytime I had a strong disagreement with any figure to my left. These conflicts would culminate in a massive schism in my fan base, jump-started in July of 2019 over a disagreement about Kamala Harris, among other things, with Hassan. with me eventually bleeding off thousands of viewers over the next few months to both Ian and Hassan. I think this is the Kamala Harris video. I think somebody wrote a huge summary of all the events leading up to the big Destiny Hassan split. I won't read through this entire thing. This is going to be long enough. The trans question. According to discoveryphds.com, the average master's dissertation length is approximately 20,000 words, whilst a PhD thesis is approximately 80,000 to 100,000 words. This document contains over 32,270 words and 490 external links. I will never write anything this long again in my life. Indefinite suspension. It's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. From the movie Rocky Balboa, a horrible movie. Anybody that says otherwise is lying to you. The official reason. Twitch sent me an email on March 23rd notifying me that my account had been permanently suspended for hateful conduct. Said email. Take a moment. Absorb it all, because a lot of people quote a lot of dumb shit related to Twitch to try to claim why I got banned. 10,000 viewers, but only 1,000 likes, so like 9,000 bots. Is that true? Are there 9,000 bots in my YouTube stream right now? Can I get some goddamn likes on my fucking stream? Hey, are you watching my stream on YouTube right now and you haven't liked the stream yet? Is it because you're a bot? Soy up. The email does not specify what words were used or what exactly was said on stream, though it does provide some links to the hateful conduct section of Twitch's community guidelines. As I was not a partnered streamer on Twitch at the time of my suspension, I unfortunately have no other way of gathering any specific information related to my suspension. I've attempted to appeal twice, requesting information relating to my suspension, but I've only been answered with automated rejections. My speculation. With no direct and clear communication relating to my ban, there's not much for me to speculate on. It's possible that my position that trans women ought to be excluded from NCAA and professional athletic competitions against cis women fell in direct violation of Twitch's hateful conduct and harassment guidelines, which states, calls for subjugation, segregation or exclusion, including political, economic, and social exclusion and segregation, based on a protected characteristic, including age. We do, however, allow discussion on certain topics, such as immigration policy, voting rights for non-citizens, and professional sports participation, as long as the content is not directly denigrating based on a protected characteristic. Wait, why are we all saying nice community wash? Oh. I'm sorry. That should have been in the manifesto. Jesus. Don't give me... Hold on, I gotta go away for 5 minutes now. Damn, I'm sorry, I can't. It's also possible that any number of comments I've made concerning certain individuals or online activist communities constituted hateful conduct, as it's impossible to determine what constitutes hateful at any given point in time, and since it seems to be a moving target at Twitch depending on the year and the streamer, it's impossible for me to say. Shout out to VGG that's watching us right now. Thank you for the kind words. What does that symbol mean? Is that guy is he a sub? Rumors. Tier 1 sub. Oh, they have tiered subs in the fortress? That's crazy. I feel like I have blueprints to that fortress. Many across Twitter and Twitch have speculated numerous reasons for why I've been suspended. Well, these reasons are unlikely unless Twitch made a mistake in their email to me. It had nothing to do with platforming Fuentes during a debate for 10 minutes, as the suspension would not have been for hateful content, but for aiding in ban evasion. The suspension also had nothing to do with anything posted on Twitter, as the email specified that the conduct occurred on stream. Others have speculated that my suspension occurred for hate raids, harassment, or other forms of brigading, but again, none of these were specified in the email sent by Twitch, and none of them fall under hateful conduct. Political considerations. Many from both the right and left speculated on how this ban will affect my political stances concerning not only trans people, but more broadly across the entire spectrum of social and political issues. Many find it apt to define their political positions based on the social groups they belong to, or to their reactions to opposing social groups. I have maintained an incredibly stable internal moral philosophy, the greatest amount of good should be created for the greatest number of people, that I've used to generate my political positions. To this day, that moral philosophy remains unchanged. Some claim that the political positions I occupy are ones I arrived at spitefully, but the reality is that conversations take different shapes depending on who is participating. If I were to argue about BLM against a progressive figure far to the left of me, I imagine a lot of our conversations would revolve around the effectiveness of rioting and how much of the protest can be characterized as such. It's entirely possible that we'd spend an entire conversation with arguing that rioters should be punished, property owners should defend their businesses, and the government should be taking a more active role intervening against the violence. But perhaps the next conversation were to be against a conservative who believes BLM has no legitimate grievances. In this conversation, I may point to the idea of riots being the language of the unheard, and that there are, at the very least, the perceptions of systemic issues that require addressing in some manner. Otherwise, it's foolish to simply complain that the problems start and stop with only the rioting. I haven't really changed positions in either of these conversations. I'm merely representing a different shade of my position based on the direction the other person is heading in the conversation. Also, it's entirely possible, if not expected, that my social or political positions may evolve over time. It's not because of spite, though. Rather, it's because I've discovered a new political position that more closely adheres to my guiding moral principles. Finally, let me say this. You may have seen many inflammatory 30-second video clips of me on Twitter or YouTube. I will no longer attempt to defend these statements because most of them are indefensible. I do not make 30-second videos, and I cannot defend a 30-second statement. If you see someone who's posted a 30-second clip of me, that video is not my content. That video is their content. There are many viral video moments of me that look bad, largely because they lack the context of the conversation surrounding the clip. Even within the full context of the conversation, the soundbite may be spicy, but it's nowhere near as hateful as people attempt to portray. One of the things I'll be addressing in this document is the importance of engaging with my source material when making political arguments. I don't want to argue against a 20-second representation of someone's argument. I want to extract the essence of their argument, the strongest form, and fight against that. I expect others to extend that same courtesy to me. Dysphoric discourse. You can only lie about who you are for so long without going crazy. From Ellen Whitlinger, from the book Parrotfish. Many ask, why debate trans-related topics at all? It affects a niche percentage of the population, with some estimates saying less than 1% of people are trans. It is incredibly divisive. It invites, maybe even begs, misinterpretation. It opens you up to liability from disagreements. Most people on either end of the argument are too dug in to ever even consider changing their minds. I argue about transpositions for the following reasons. 1, transpositions help you explore another person's view of their morality and how they view the world. 2, trans discourse is especially prone to being incredibly poor, so it's a conversation I want to improve. 3, there's poor representation among people who support trans issues on the internet. And 4, I have a sizable trans community in my own audience. Many have incredibly strong views about gender and sex and their place in our society, yet have little understanding of how these concepts are constructed. While they're quick to push you for definitions about what is a man or a woman, you ask them the same question, they'll quickly default to definitions surrounding chromosomes and genitalia, rejecting the sex-gender distinction, while neglecting the fact that we determine someone's gender 99% of the time without ever having access to either of those pieces of information. The reality is that sex and gender are complicated topics that are worth having complicated discussions over. Even if we all broadly agree on 98% of gender and sex definitions, there's no harm in pushing the boundary a bit if we can encompass a few more people in society to drastically improve the quality of their lives without causing harm to anyone else. The state of trans discourse on the internet is abysmal. It seems that on one extreme of the argument, you have genuinely transphobic figures who don't believe trans people even exist. These people say trans people should be denied healthcare, community support, opportunities to integrate into society, and feel that their entire existence shouldn't be acknowledged as anything other than mental delusion. On the other end of things, you've got people who want to eliminate women's sports, unquestioningly affirm every single person's belief that they're trans, even if they're a 4 or 5-year-old child, claim that trans women experience periods, attack lesbians for their dating preferences, and claim that not wanting to have sex with a trans person is transphobic. It's important to acknowledge the biological distinctions between trans and cis people so that we can have a realistic conversation about how best to integrate trans people into society in as many ways as possible. I feel like we all know conservatives say this shit, so I don't have to source it. But I wanted to have sources for every time I've heard somebody or seen somebody make this claim. I try to make sure that whenever I source an opinion here too, that these are pretty popular things or there are stories written about them. This tweet had 85,000 likes. Okay, I'm a trans woman who is experiencing her first period cramps, and what the fuck? I've literally trans women don't get periods. This tweet was over 100,000 likes. Not wanting to date trans women stems from y'all not viewing them as real women. So yes, your preference is transphobic. I think there was a BBC story here written about the lesbians who feel pressured to have sex and relationships with trans women. Just goes on to talk about some of that. From Destiny. Wait, it was something... Was the person's name Destiny? Did I not even notice that? Oh shit, it is. Oh man, the simulation's breaking down, guys. A few stories of what I did when my 4-year-old told me that he's transgender. Mom opens up about raising a 5-year-old son who is transgender. Just... okay. Trans supporters, along with many other supporters of issues that are considered left on the internet, like sex workers, seem to be ubiquitously tied to extremist leftist economic and political ideologies. Almost any trans-supporting public figure you find on the internet seems to identify as a socialist, communist, or some type of anarchist. I think it's positive to show that a moderately positioned person can be staunchly in favor of trans rights, and it demonstrates that you don't necessarily need to embrace an entire change of economy or government in order to respect and accommodate trans people in daily life. From those in the back. Okay, this is the most controversial section, and you'll see why in a second. I don't know how I'm going to do this. The nature of political and social discourse lends itself to conversations that involve a wide breadth of experiences foreign to myself. One of the most valuable tools available to me is soliciting others for feedback to ensure that my opinions are tracking with the lived realities of many of those I speak for. Trans experiences are no different. Before I get into any detailed accounting of my social and legal positions on trans issues, I'd like to cite 31 excerpts from the hundreds of emails I've gotten from my trans viewers over the past few months. I understand there may be a selection bias due to the types of people who are more likely to watch me, but all I can do is ask for experiences from my audience and listen. I believe that will better lay the groundwork for the development of my perspective and why I have the positions I do on these topics. Do I want to read every single one of these emails? I'm not sure. We'll start going and I'll see how I feel after a few of them. But I got hundreds of emails from different types of trans people when we had this whole debacle a few months ago to see how we felt or to see how they felt about things, what their positions were on things. And yeah, but we'll see. Some names and details have been changed in order to protect the anonymity of those who've emailed me. Email 1. It's exhausting as a person who is sort of into politics who is also trans. In podcasts, people will bring up trans people out of nowhere and everyone has to have a strong opinion on trans issues. One second, I'm chilling, listening to a podcast, and the next second, somebody's given a take that feels very personal and relevant to me. It's stressful. It's not just the trans stuff, of course. There is so much politics and shit happening all the time and nasty, disingenuous people out there everywhere. After a while, I just want to tune out and live my life. Go to work, come home, play some games, work on some hobbies, go to sleep. I don't have the stamina to be out there on Twitter or Reddit arguing against anti-trans people and pro-trans dear gender people. Contra said something like this a while back with the Buck Angel controversy. It hurts a lot of people to be casted out and rejected by the trans community after feeling like the trans community is one of the few places that was supposed to be a safe space of people who understand me. I don't want to be in chat and all of a sudden somebody's asking me if I'm trans and it's a big deal and like a regular Discord server, some of the people will be cool with it and some of them are not, and all of a sudden I just started a bunch of drama by speaking words in voice chat. So there is strong pressure to conform, or at least not challenge whatever stuff trans people are saying online as a trans person myself. It really hurts when the community turns on me. It also sucks that the noisy trans people online have some more extreme views on things. Nobody will hear my point of view because I'm too busy living life and too tired to be arguing with people on Twitter all day. It's the same with my trans friends, and it sucks that some people get aggravated by whatever dumb shit crazy trans people on the internet say. Even when you're super duper careful with which trans people you're talking about, emotionally, I still feel like I'm being lumped into that group. I fear people will lump us all into the same group. It's just how a human processes emotions, I guess. I hope crazy online people don't warp your sense of perception of how the real world is. Number 2. I always just wanted to live a somewhat normal life as a woman, living stealth in trans terms. Not a trans woman, not a trans activist, not a person in queer culture, just a woman. The reason to distance myself from being a trans woman grow with every bad take these online communities give. Number 3. Both my partner and I are progressive peeps. My partner was actually a huge Hassan fan when we met, but not anymore. But we both harbor beliefs about trans issues that we'd never share publicly or with most of our friends because we know we'd get ostracized for them. Or in my case, even potentially banned from a huge gaming community I'm a part of. This bothers me a lot more than it does her. Here's some examples. You need dysphoria to be trans. She feels strongly about this. I'm still thinking about where I stand. Trans women cannot fairly compete in cis women's sports. Neo-pronouns are made-up internet bullshit. Non-binary people aren't trans. She feels strongly, something I'm still thinking about. Both of us cringe at the ultra-left online trans community, but in my case, I sort of went through a year-long phase of being one of those people, which obviously I now look back on and cringe, but yeah, I used to be friends with a lot of the people you now fight with on Twitter. But yeah, not a huge fan of being lumped in with those people, but it's almost unavoidable if I value my relationships and ability to participate in certain communities more than I do the ability to speak my mind about everything. We both pass, but she really wants to be completely invisible, where I, on the other hand, just don't care as much if people know. However, it does feel really shitty that there's this culture in this new age trans community of like, oh my god, I can tell you're trans. I'm trans too. Let's talk about that. And I hate that shit. I had a friend of a friend clock me, like in this woke way, and was sort of put off by it. My friend couldn't understand why I cared at all. Worse than just being clocked to me is when people who do know I'm trans try to virtue signal this allyship to me. Like, go out of their way to say stuff like, hey girl, when they don't normally speak to people like that, and I can tell. This shit makes me physically cringe, and more othered than when someone actually does just misgender me. But some people do like that shit. I don't know. It's all my perspective. Number 4. I'm a trans woman and local political advocate in my area. I know you said you don't want trans women to come on to agree with you as a trans shield, as you said, but I don't think these people truly understand how dangerous their influence is. I've worked for 2 campaigns door knocking for people in my district. If a progressive Democrat wanted me to read off lines similar to what like Demon Mama, Josie, or Vosh sometimes says, I wouldn't partake in door knocking or canvassing because I would be afraid of how people would react. Like it's basic reality they're denying, and somehow it has webbed so many normally rational people who, like in my college, have started believing this. Number 5. I'm kind of insulted that Mr. Beard thought he knew anything about trans folk. It honestly sounded like the only thing he knew was radical statements he found on the internet. I understand the sentiment of don't gatekeep being trans, which is where the whole true scum trans medicalist hate comes from. And I don't think someone's invalid for not doing invasive surgeries, but at some point we have to be able to accuse people of fuckery. I never wanted to be trans. I had seemingly permanent depression for the last decade. I also suffered from suicidal ideation and panic attacks while I was confronting myself to make a decision on my identity. The only thing that's helped me was counseling and moving towards the goal of physical transition. Dysphoria is literally the only reason I call myself trans. My brain said, whoa, something's wrong here. I'm not like the others. It's the only reason I changed my identity to reflect and describe my experience. If someone's not actually describing an experience they are a part of, should they really be allowed to claim it? If someone called themselves a veteran, but they've never served in the military, we would agree that that means they're not a veteran. Hence the reason we put the word veteran on their ID to separate the liars from the real ones. I don't think we need trans IDs, but I do think the term transgender should be reserved for the people actually transitioning or desires to in some manner. Most likely because of dysphoria. Changing your pronouns is like changing your full name to a shortened version or a nickname. My given name is Draven, but I dislike it. Drave, on the other hand, feels easy, simple, and neutral. Drave is my preferred name. He, him are my preferred pronouns. But nothing about my preference actually means anything. I would say that identifying my dysphoria and my desire to correct it as the indicator that I am trans. I would say that feeling happier and healthier on the opposite sex's hormones would describe my experience as trans. Changing my pronouns does not actually describe the suffering, struggle, or experience I deal with. It merely allows me to feel respect for my journey to manhood. Number 6. Within the 2 months between starting HRT from October 29th to December 27th of 2021, it felt extremely similar to me when I took the SSRI Lexapro in the past. My brain felt calm and satisfied by the correction being made to the medicine. I still question myself, thinking I must still be high off the weed from last night sometimes. Once the estrogen, and spironolactone, anti-androgens, testosterone blockers, kicked in, my seemingly permanent depression vanished. I've never felt more happy and mentally free than right now. I've even spent $2,000 on laser hair removal for my face, which improved my self-confidence tenfold. Not because society doesn't want women to have facial hair, but because I don't want facial hair. It's basically itchy pubes on the face, and it's entirely unneeded. Waking up in the morning and noticing that all the shaving I did yesterday meant nothing because it's already growing back is an insanely frustrating thing, especially when you have sensitive skin. Nothing about taking HRT the last 5 months or socially transitioning the last year and a half has ever proved to me it isn't a fucked situation between my brain and body. I'm absolutely getting the short end of the stick no matter which direction I take. To be honest, I would rather be alone forever as trans than to regret never transitioning, which feels like never being happy. But only because I feel like people actually see me for me now. If it were the case that I could be socialized into being cis, I think all the transphobia and internalized hatred of myself would have cured me. No amount of poking and prodding of a cis person will ever make them want to transition. So why is it that people refuse to accept that, from our best guess, the identities of trans people reflect that of cis people and are immutable? It's practically the same argument as sexuality. I was never straight or cis to begin with. You could even say that they attempted to socialize me into being straight and cis, but it never worked. I just chose to accept the fact that I was bi or as a trans woman. In middle school, my real-life aspiration was to have a woman's body when I became an adult, but I assumed it was just a fantasy and couldn't actually happen because I knew nothing about being trans until half a decade later. I refuse to hang out, number 7. I refuse to hang out in trans or LGBT activist-type communities. There are great trans meme groups and great trans-friendly spaces for other topics, but when everything becomes about how negative everything is and how rhetoric demands outrageous claims otherwise all is lost, then I'm an outie. I enjoy my queer and trans friends, and I enjoy my straight cis friends, but joining LGBT plus discords and that Zoomer app Amino was horrible. It literally rides on elitism and the proclaimed suffering. There's nothing fun about obsessing or coping with a group. It's often focused on idpol anyways. I also joined a queer app called Taimi? And there seems to be a load of clueless pre-transition trans folks. If they're all on this social or dating app trying to match with further along trans folks to ask questions like, where do I get HRT? And my counselor referred me to a place that closed, or what insurance do I need? There clearly aren't proper spaces for them. Those communities that claim to support trans folks are dumb fucks who obsess about fuckboys online identifying as super straight and how you should be able to change all the documents with all the documents that literally declare your existence from assigned gender at birth to preferred gender at the click of a button with no mediation. Not to mention the inability for allies to ever visit these communities without having to be programmed and set in the corner to repeat catchphrases is ridiculous. I'm most likely the only trans person most of the people in my life will ever hold a connection with. If I were to take any of these dumb fuck takes from online and shout them at my friends or family, then I'd never get to build anything with them. Compassion and empathy for people in a changing world is the most impactful thing I can offer. And at the end of the day, the people around me understand that trans people aren't all that different. Number 8. I started watching more and more debates, and eventually I started to really appreciate your arguments. You've helped me learn how to foster an internal value system and derive ideas and stances from that. You helped me understand the importance of being introspective and consistent. I know people think that your fans are just cringe debate bros, but from your conversations, I've learned to listen and ask questions. My discussions with friends and family become more productive and far less heated because I have the tools to navigate them with a level head. Your work has improved my life tremendously and improved the lives of those around me by some amount as well. I also want to thank you for talking about trans issues the way that you do. I find you discuss trans issues with an enormous amount of empathy. I really feel you've done your best to consider a trans experience in the way a shallow retard, I don't know, I should have edited that, like Hassan never could. You articulate the trans experience better than any cis person I've seen online and better than 95% of trans people online. I've also felt so frustrated and invalidated by the sports debates. It drives me crazy to hear people say that hormones erase all biological difference. HRT has been wonderful for me, but it's not magical. It's very limited, actually. While I can get plastic surgery on my face to better approach a cis appearance, because of the effects of male puberty, I have broader shoulders than 95% of cis women. It's one of my biggest insecurities, and I have to be careful with the clothes I choose not to emphasize that feature and evoke the image of man in a dress. Incidentally, those same broad shoulders would absolutely give me an advantage if I was a competitive swimmer. Just look at a picture of Michael Phelps. Oh, this is controversial. Autogynephilia, I think is the term, is something that trans spaces won't engage with at all. They'll flatly tell you it doesn't exist and that it's just a transphobic lie. I find that very invalidating to my own experience. At the same time, I still feel very ashamed of my sexual proclivities. I often question whether or not I'm really trans, and I feel like I can never discuss this publicly because my words will just be weaponized by TERFs and transphobes to hurt other trans people. I've thought about writing a book exploring some of these ideas, but I question whether or not it would be responsible to do so. Logically, I think I really am trans. I can recall a desire to be female that predates any sexual attraction, and even as hormones have slashed my libido, my desire to be a woman has not waned. When I reach new levels of appearance, I get aroused and I masturbate to my reflection. Then after a few times, it just becomes mundane and normal to me. I keep these feelings under lock and key because of how much trans people and transphobes alike would hate me for this. Emotionally, I feel like a fake. Still, there's also an internal transformation that occurs during transition. My vocabulary and inflections have started adapting in ways I hadn't anticipated. My emotional self is changing, partially due to hormones. I never used to cry, but now I'll find myself tearing up at random bullshit like pictures of cute puppies or a really delicious slice of cake. Estrogen is a hell of a drug. I'm picking up some new hobbies and friends and dropping old ones. I'm undergoing a social metamorphosis, not just a physical one. I really enjoy when I can just pass as cis. When I move through my life like a normal woman, it feels really nice and really peaceful. COVID has helped by normalizing masks. Masks are a godsend for trans women. When people realize I'm trans, they'll ask me my pronouns or start trying to talk about trans politics with me. It's just really annoying and othering. I have enough anxiety as is. I hate attention. I hate pronouns. I hate people patronizing me and telling me how brave I am and how happy they are for me. I literally just want to be a normal person. Number 9. Hearing Mr. Beard talk like this made me want to 41% myself, and I wanted you desperately to clarify that some people aren't trans. Some are white suburban privileged fucks seeking attention off the back of actual trans people who face actual harm in society. These are the trans people this dumb fuck talks to. You made these clarifications clear during the cringe neo-pronoun shit, but God, I just wanted you to hammer it in each and every time he made these claims. It does not matter how mild or severe your dysphoria is, but you need some gender dysphoria to be trans. Well, at least I'm 99% sure that's true for what we know. Though I am certain you just stopped caring halfway through the debate when it was clear how terminally online this guy is. Still, I wish it was hammered more because of my next point. I'm convinced that lefties and toxic trans people like Keffels believe people in the middle do not exist. To these people, only the far right and far left exist. You're either a trans ally or a transphobe. The current online trans community is the most harmful thing for trans people as a whole. I hear you keep saying that these people do not represent the trans community, which I feel is mostly true. I'm worried for the future, and I'm seeing the effects of people like Keffels bleed into the real world. I know these people only exist on Twitter and have no real-world interactions. However, I do. I live in the Deep South, a small town. I suck off Bezos in a huge factory so that I can have an opportunity to get HRT. I get the opportunity to see many different faces and talk to them. A good majority are right-leaning and are of the crowd of tolerating trans people, and others are just on the fence. Truth is, it seems most everyday people just don't care and don't know facts about the issue. Understandable. The thing is, from what I can tell, it's cunts like Keffels and the far left that push these people to the right to these issues the most. The reason I feel like I can't come out to some of these people, a few of which I become friends with, it's not because of J.K. Rowling, it's not because of TERFs, and it's not because of Kiwi Farms or 4chan. Normal, everyday people don't give a fuck about those things. It's because of these crazy fucking lefties on Twitter or IRL and the bad interactions with radicals that stick with them. When I probe some people about trans issues, I don't hear about how cool J.K. Rowling is and how based her tweets are. I hear about how they got called a transphobe by some dear self because they wouldn't burn their Harry Potter wand they got at Universal. The small number of people I do come out to joke about how I'll get canceled or fired if they misgender me. It's lighthearted, but it's because of what they see from memes or TikTok. For older people, it was Facebook mom shit. It's upsetting to me, and I know this is likely not what the rest of the US is like. It's probably not how most of my state is, but fuck, it irritates me to see any normal voting person pushed to the right by these crazies. I feel like these people are going to actually set us back 50 years at this point. That won't happen, but I hope you can feel my frustration. TGG might be the only bastion left that can represent a normal online trans community. I have been called a transphobe so much the past few days. Communities on Twitter or Reddit are like too far gone now. Granted, they always were, but at least I could exist in those spaces and have normal takes. Now I just feel alienated. I feel lonely. It's all a crazy echo chamber of shitty takes. If I say anything against the community or narrative, I should kill myself, or I'm not a real trans person, or I'm just transphobic. I'm so thankful that you and your community exist. I'm glad I can exist here with normal ideas. More importantly, you might say something along the lines of not going to these crazy places in the first place or disengaging with dumb fucks on Twitter. It's a little hard here. We don't exactly have a strong trans community. In fact, the biggest left community we have here is, can you guess? Yeah, they're tankies. So usually, if you want an IRL trans interaction, you're a little forced into it with these people. I dated someone from this group, and I'll come back to that. If you thought there was any hope in this, well, there's not. They watch Hassan and meme on Twitter. So I just want to say, as far as online spaces go, I'm grateful that I have some representation that know what the fuck they're talking about when it comes to trans issues, so thank you. Number 10. We're 1/3 of the way through these emails. I don't know if we'll read them all. We'll see. I scoffed when I heard the guy you were debating say that trans people can find realizing they're trans as freeing, because to me, it's felt like a curse that ruined my entire fucking life. By the time I made it to 20, I was genuinely going to kill myself. I tried to. I threw myself into traffic in the hopes that I would get murdered in a car crash, but unfortunately I was only injured and I kept living. I tried swallowing a bunch of pills, but I ended up vomiting them up. I was too anxious to go and buy a gun to kill myself with, so I didn't end up doing that, and the idea of stabbing myself to death was just a little too painful for me. It was around this level of suffering that I realized I was being foolish. Not the suicide part. I was still pretty sure that was happening, but I realized that I may as well try to transition. My logic at the time was this: if I don't transition, the odds of me committing suicide are 100%. Life is pure pain, and I just wouldn't be able to take it for much longer. But if I transition, if I fundamentally change every single aspect of myself as a human being from the ground up, or if I learn how to talk like a girl, walk like a girl, get lucky with the hormone treatment, somehow fixing the problem with my body, learn an entire new set of social skills, lose 150 pounds, every single person in my friend and family accepts me, if I'm blessed with the right facial genetics to pass as feminine, if I'm able to find a doctor in my area who's even willing to administer the medication to me, if I can do all of this, I might be happy one day. That astronomically low chance is still higher than 0%, so I decided, fuck it, I'll try. This thought process alone, I think, encapsulates the suffering of gender dysphoria the best. Imagine living your entire life and putting in as much effort as possible every single day, overcoming severe mental distress and essentially recreating yourself while still overcoming the challenges of everyday life just to get yourself a chance to feel happy. Even if everything goes right, if you do everything perfectly, it's still entirely possible and frankly even likely that you won't even be happy. I would know because that's what happened to me. I worked hard and I won the lottery. I objectively pass. I can go out into the world with no prompting of any kind. I'm treated as a woman in society. But it didn't fix my anxiety. It doesn't make me hate myself less. It doesn't even help the dysphoria that badly. Probably at least once a week, I need my boyfriend to talk me off the ledge of a building, metaphorically, because I go on a psychotic rant about not being a real woman and how I'll never really pass. It doesn't even matter that I have years of lived experiences telling me that I passed, because the demons in my head won't let me believe it. This is the reality I deal with every day, and I know many other trans people, anecdotally speaking, who go through something similar to this. I know a lot of passing trans women, and it doesn't even matter that they pass. The dysphoria struggle is still real. So with all of that being said, when I hear about non-binary deerkin on Twitter with blue hair talking about how oppressed they are and how transphobic people are for not using their Z-Zim pronouns, and how valid they are despite the extent of their transition being their Twitter bio, and never feeling a shred of dysphoria all their lives, it makes me want to shoot myself more than the dysphoria ever did. I actually hate these people. I've had friends kill themselves because they couldn't handle it anymore, and I'm supposed to pretend that these people are the same as us? Fuck that. Not only do they try to pretend that we are somehow the same, but they actively fuck things up for the rest of us. For every stupid tweet one of these dipshits make, it's yet another conversation I have to have with my religious conservative family. I've had to unravel their lunacy more times than I can count. It has evolved past frustration into genuine hatred. I'm gonna grab my drink of water real quick. Number 11. Anyway, after this long ramble, I just want to say one thing on the broad subject. The term transgender is overly broad at the point where it's losing value as a descriptor. If people who don't have dysphoria or don't want to medically transition want to call themselves transgender, then whatever. I don't care about what anyone does or doesn't want to do with their bodies or their social presentation. But we are not the same. To lump us all together, all under the same umbrella term, does people like me a disservice because it dilutes the importance of having the proper medical care. It's like if we didn't have words for gay or lesbian or bisexual and just called everyone who wasn't straight queer. I really don't like it when people who don't have these intense life-ruining issues I've had come in and start muddying the waters surrounding those issues. If people want to push for placing less importance on gender roles in society, then sure, fine, it's probably a worthy cause. But don't do it by hijacking the discussion around a very specific issue relating to a very specific group of people like me. If people want transgender to be an inclusive umbrella term for anyone who doesn't rigidly conform to the most strict definition of traditional gender, then so be it, but we need new, narrower terms to describe specific things. Number 12. With time, I came to realize that trans online communities are extremely toxic. They overfixate on acceptance and validation to the point of insanity. Subreddits that were dedicated to educating and poking fun at trans people in denial have become toxic sewers in which if you dare to speak up against the current beliefs, you are immediately shunned, silenced, and called a transphobe or a true scum. All reason and civil discourse has been silenced. The obsession with being valid runs rampant. They do not care whether they're right or wrong. The only thing they care to look online is validation and blind acceptance. It deeply saddens me because it's going to lead to a massive outburst in transphobia. 13. For a bit of context, I transitioned at 15 in early high school. I'm 21 now. When I transitioned, this was barely even a thing anyone knew about, and I was the only trans person I knew. Non-binary stuff was only just beginning to exist, not like it is today. But by the time I got to college, that had changed, and it's honestly been very surreal. I swear to God, I've met like 30 plus online people or 30 plus in real life people at my school that go by some other pronouns or claim to be trans while just looking like normal cis people. Now I'm stealth, so like I'm not even really in specifically LGBT spaces either. At first, I didn't really mind, but the more common it got, the weirder it got for me. These people rarely even know much of anything about trans issues either. It's very strange. It's like I'm walking on thin ice, trying not to offend a group that I'm literally a part of. The most surreal experience I've had out of all of them was when I made the mistake of telling a specific friend I was trans, and they didn't really realize I was stealth, and they told their roommate. When I hung out at their place, once they were like, oh my God, I'm the only cis person here, and it was just her and her extremely gender-conforming female roommate, and that roommate, after specifically having me telling them that I'm stealth, would somehow bring it up to every other person that ended up coming over. It was insane. They would like joke about cis people like it was some uncool thing to be, and it was weird as fuck. That reminds me of another thing you said, which was that online spaces are like 99% male. I've actually had the exact opposite experience. While online tends to be male R, and I've definitely met some male NB types in real life, it is hugely dominated by like woke white women. Like the trans support group at my university is roughly 90% AFAB, assigned female at birth, with most of them being like cis women with dyed hair and she/they pronouns or weird neo-pronoun shit. I have yet to meet a single other trans woman that wasn't super early in transition, despite their support group chat having like 50 people in it. It's very isolating and weird. Like, why is a group supposedly about me not at all relevant to myself? That also connects to my biggest pet peeve, where people will do dumb woke things in the names of supposedly helping me that actively make my life worse. Like pronoun tags for everyone and introducing themselves with pronouns on everyone doesn't help me at all. My entire point of my transition is that I actually wanted to be seen as a woman by others, and now I basically can't tell if I'm being seen that way or if it's some woke shit. The worst offender was that a bunch of clubs at my school swapped out woman for woman identified. Like this a cappella group changed its name from the All Women's A Cappella Group to the All Women Identified A Cappella Group. I wish I was making this shit up. This has turned into a bit of a rant, and like at the end of the day, I can blend in as cis for the most part, so it's not like it's the end of the world. It's just very weird, and the extent of it in recent years has been insane. It's like despite being only 21, having transitioned earlier meant I transitioned in a completely different time and culture to most trans people my age. And now that I'm stealth, I don't have the I'm trans defense without outing myself, and I can't even really say anything when I hear people say this insane stuff. 14. I personally have battled with a trans identity for as long as I can remember, before I even knew what that was. Growing up, it was obviously scary to explain to someone, but as time went on, it wasn't being scared of people judging me from coming out that kept me from doing it for so long. It was the opinions and insane talking points of people in the LGBT communities, because I was afraid to be casted out by the only people I thought could understand me for not agreeing with their viewpoints. 15. Oh, this is like a little bit of background on like the true scum and too cutes and all of that. I don't know if I've read this one straight before. As I understand it, years ago, mostly on Tumblr, there was a huge surge in the uwu, xenogender, otherkin stuff in the trans community. There was a rift between people who accepted that and those who believed that transgender was a serious thing, not something to express how different and special you were to your friends. The uwu community started calling these people true trans because they felt that they were deciding who was really trans or who was a true trans person. The true trans started calling the other side too cutes because it was a meme on Tumblr and Reddit for someone questioning their gender to post a selfie with people in the comments, etc., saying the OP was too cute to not be trans. Ooh woo. Of course, because the online trans community is toxic as fuck, the too cutes started calling the true trans the new insult, true scum. They decided to embrace the insult, calling themselves that. The true scum community was composed of mainly hardcore trans medicalists in the beginning, i.e., not only needing dysphoria to be trans, but also needing to be in the process of transitioning physically, usually working towards eventual surgery to be legitimate. Some trans meds were not considering non-binary people to even be real at all. This is where I step into the community. I'm going to talk about Reddit in particular from here on, because once the Tumblr became SFW, I noped out of that hell site. As time went on, more moderate people such as myself started to feel alienated by the general trans community because of our stances on dysphoria, too cutes, xenogenders, etc. I found the subreddit True Scum at some point because I would see other posters and commenters on the transgender subreddit, male to female subreddit, the trans subreddit, etc. Get threads locked, posts deleted, and users banned for saying you need dysphoria to be trans or questioning anyone's legitimacy, no matter how ridiculous they were. Things like he, him, lesbians, neopronouns, self-described trans men femboys with no dysphoria showing off big booba, not safe for work selfies, etc. Our True Scum became a pretty chill place, basically just like the other trans sub, but safe for people like me to express their opinions without fear of a ban, which, by the way, I had to use a separate account entirely so as not to get banned on other trans subs. The community is painted as hateful bigots, transphobes, racists, right-wing, etc., but for the most part, it's just a normal center-left trans community that occasionally makes fun of the cringe teenagers on Tumblr, on TikTok mostly nowadays. All of this is to say, if a trans person is labeled true scum on the internet, don't assume they're a bad person or hold bigoted views. Now, for the most important part, do you need dysphoria to be trans? I believe that in order to be considered transgender, or at least not in a separate category, you ought to have current or alleviated gender dysphoria. If you don't have gender dysphoria, that means you have no negative feelings about remaining in your assigned birth gender presentation or identification. At this point, it seems to me like a person just wants to be transgender because they just choose to. Transgender, a person whose sense of personal identity and gender does not correspond with their birth sex. That sense of personal identity is an immutable characteristic. You can't help this. This isn't a choice. You've argued this several times before on stream. It's who I am inside. I have difficulty believing that there are people in good faith saying that who they are on the inside is opposite their birth gender, but legitimately have no negative feelings about staying that way they were assigned at birth. If these people exist, they may as well not identify as trans because they're not really any different than people who aren't trans but want to be the opposite gender because they think it's cool. It actually reminds me of the champagne socialist argument you had with Vaush. Even if these people technically fit the definition, they're not really worth talking about when discussing the difficulties of the group as a whole. I and many others in the True Scum community have a pretty low bar for what is considered dysphoria. I don't think you need to be in the process of transitioning. If you can't because of your financial situation or because you live in an unsupportive family or community, that's fine. You can still be trans. You don't have to have dysphoria bad enough to be suicidal. You don't need to get sex reassignment surgery. The point is, you want to be the opposite gender if everything was perfect, and importantly, not want to stay in your current gender assignment. Oh, halfway done. Get some more water, guys. I'll pull again at 20 emails. We want to finish them all. 16. What changed my life was facial feminization surgery. At 13 months, I had FFS with arguably the best surgeon for $50,000, which my insurance fully paid for, thanks to my cushy engineering job. And suddenly I started presenting as me 100% of the time. Initially, I was very much an activist. I used my Instagram to advocate for pro-trans causes, to raise awareness of anti-trans legislation, etc. Part of this was me wanting to give back to others like me, to help create a future where trans people wouldn't have to wait until 27 to feel like they could transition without throwing away their chance at a happy life. I grew up steeped in media that made me hate who I was. Maury and Jerry Springer shows featuring trans people were some of the only media I could find that featured real-life trans people, and those depictions were so negative. These are people who were subjecting themselves to this ridicule to survive. I didn't see any hyper-successful engineers or business people that were trans that I could look up to. And now that I was this person I'd wished society would show me, I wanted to be visible. Fast forward to now, this isn't quite the case anymore. I still feel similarly in that I hope trans people don't face what I faced growing up and don't have to be afraid of being disowned and ruining their lives by coming out to their parents, for example. But I no longer engage very much in the online advocacy outlets. I started out really engaged in early on. I just can't relate to the online trans community in so many ways. I have a few really close trans girlfriends in real life that I adore. Most of them identify as heterosexual and are in relationships with men, and for all of us, being trans is just one part of who we are, and not really a major facet at that. I don't hide that I'm trans. I'm still open that I am on social media and with friends. But in real life situations, I don't want every person I interact with to know that I'm trans. My whole identity and set of interests aren't derived from that aspect of my identity. Also, I do feel like some of the online Twitter trans advocates are advocating for causes that will end up hurting our progress as a community, will cause more real transphobia to manifest. And to be totally honest, I'd be really afraid that if I spoke up about these feelings, I would have crazy people trying to get me fired and ruin my life. Number 17. Basically, trans communities online are super mega extreme. People use positions of authority to convince kids to get on hormones with no accountability or regulation, which is really dangerous and reflects on the trans community and feeds into the grooming kids narrative, as well as banning anyone who dissents or isn't super ooh-woo hug boxing. Secondly, it hurts so much to be demonized by other trans people online. I can't go to many trans communities online because they all inevitably become super ooh-woo validating, ooh-woo hug boxing. If you go against any of this, you're putting the trans medicalist label, which has tons of really bad associations. Like any level of dissent or like disagreement when it comes to these spaces, you are cast out. It's really fucking alienating. These spaces also are super hug boxing, saying everyone passes, which can be dangerous to younger people who may be attacked. You can already understand this, but it's really scary that there are people in these communities online that are like figures of authority, like admin mods or big community members who convince these kids to get on do-it-yourself HRT with no accountability. And when this shit goes wrong, it reflects back on the entire trans community. Basically, it is a huge fester that grows in online spaces that pushes out literally all not extreme people out of the spaces to spare everyone's feelings and engages in very dangerous actions. TLDR for the next section, all online content creators but you and some others engage or encourage this behavior I talked about above, and it is very scary. Because I feel like we are barreling towards undoing a lot of progress and making things materially worse for a lot of trans people with how ideologically bought into positions they are. Because it is just a fact of reality, these online people gain more and more real-life influence every day as more and more people tune into Twitch and their streams, and they grow especially within the trans community. Thirdly, I feel like all online political communicators for trans issues engage in all of these terrible behaviors I've explained above. It's really scary. I go door to door for local elections, and if I had to repeat talking points for a Democrat that Vosh, Demon Mama, or Josie or Maddie or any of these people say, I genuinely fear for my life. I'm scared. I love politics, and I don't like being doomer pilled. But Steven, I'm genuinely scared deep down things are going to get significantly worse before they get better. I fear we're heading towards this edge, but we have already hit the velocity to where it's too late to stop. I'm scared for my future. I know that society won't fall. I know trans people probably won't be gunned down in America. I'm not delusional, but I'm afraid of hate crimes going up. I'm afraid of losing my friends. I'm afraid I'll have to quit politics that makes me happy. I'm too emotional at the moment to keep writing. I'm super sorry this is so long. I just care so deeply for all of this, and I feel like as things online become more prominent, literally in my college clubs, in a progressive meeting. And I feel like this as things online become more prominent, literally in my college clubs and at a progressive meeting I went to a while ago. 18. I'm so glad that suffering is not necessary for many young trans people these days. On the other hand, how people speak about trans issues now is troubling, putting so much emphasis on everyone and every gender being valid, to the point where you could probably categorize any normal person as non-binary because it's all so encompassing. This makes zero sense and leads us to the xenogender discourse, which I would like to go away forever. The biggest reason I'm grateful for your voice is because I begin to lose faith in people. I began to lose hope that people still thought like I do when I joined discourse on Twitter and spoke against xenogenders. I got death threats and people encouraging my suicide, including from prominent people in the Demon Mama community. Further, I believe this de-emphasis I see on medical transition in these communities is troubling. Who will fight for that for us if we have half of trans people saying medical transition is unnecessary to be valid? Let me drink one second. Gender dysphoria at number 19. Gender dysphoria is about as close to an IRL body horror as you can get. Being trapped in a body that you know isn't right for you is hell. I constantly worried about my appearance. I fretted over things no one else would notice, and I always felt like I was taking up space for real, cis women. Online, everyone might go, yes, queen, you're so valid, of course you're a woman, you look so good. But those are just words, and most of the time, they feel like lies. Sometimes they are. The reality of being trans is, if someone can tell you are trans, if they can clock you, they almost never consider you a member of the gender you identify as. You're a fucked up man or woman, or, depending on how bigoted they are, just a thing to them. Number 20. When I've been discriminated against at past jobs, my most significant non-one-off experiences with bigotry was never because my coworkers got bad opinions about trans people from dipshits on the internet. It was because there were, so this is like an email from the other end. Not every single email I got agreed with me, so I tried to include a couple. There weren't as many that disagreed with me, maybe because of my fans or whatever, but I tried to include the ones that would have other points of view as well. When I've been discriminated against at past jobs, my most significant non-one-off experiences with bigotry, it was never because my coworkers got bad opinions about trans people from dipshits on the internet. It was because they were conservative types that hated me because I was early in my transition. I looked like a weird guy in my Waffle House uniform because I was on HRT and wore makeup, and I sounded like a girl because of voice training. I don't think most people care about the online shit. It's just an excuse they use. They'd use some other excuse for why they don't like you if they didn't have that. The other worst sorts of experiences I've had were in college when I thought people legitimately wanted to be my friend, but it turned out that they actually just clocked me and wanted to sit me down to ask me some personal questions about being trans. Before they moved on and didn't talk to me again. I cannot tell you how many times someone has asked me if I've gotten the surgery after talking to me for less than 5 minutes. Oof, okay. We're at 21. Do we want to finish the rest of the emails? I think we're going to. I think it's important to hear it. Even if you guys don't like it, I'm not pulling it. "21. I feel like I have pretty mild gender dysphoria from stories I've read. I used to absolutely despise looking at myself in the mirror, avoided people taking photos like they would kill me. I spent hours upon hours a week plucking hair one by one out of my body and starved myself to the point of looking like I was in a concentration camp. I've thankfully been able to mostly solve these issues by taking care of my skin, living a more healthy lifestyle via eating well and working out, and dressing and acting more feminine. I 100% feel like I am an oddity when going outside with my nails painted, carrying a handbag with feminine mannerisms, but I can actually function like that compared to previously where I used to struggle to place an order at a fast food restaurant. I have an appointment with an endocrinologist booked, although still months out to see if HRT is a good solution for me, and I'm testing the waters to see if I want to slowly transition. I will say that there's been a weirdly scary amount of people who I have come across along my journey to figure out what the actual fuck is wrong with me, who claim to be trans, to not understand gender dysphoria. Seem to not understand gender dysphoria, which ends up making me feel fucking insane. It is legit frustrating joining a community of people who seem to think it's just fun or fashionable to be trans and don't seem to have any reason to have transitioned in the first place. It's even more frustrating having people try and convince me that I'm currently trans due to the way I present and act, even though I really haven't done anything yet. It seems fucking bizarre that it seems like the bare minimum to be trans is to just act or dress non-conforming to your assigned gender. All the recent stuff in the news, thanks to the, in my opinion, retardation in America over trans issues, which then has spiraled into arguments on social media, has legit made me feel unwell for weeks at a time due to me wishing I had nothing in common with these people. While there are some very good vocal pro-trans voices out there, it feels like the vast majority make it seem like an insane cult. While thankfully, this has made me rethink my approach to potentially transitioning, has made me more cautious, I feel it would be easier for people like me if we just faded back into the background and went somewhat unnoticed. 22. Hello, I'm watching your latest video on the subject of toxic online trans communities came up, and at 53 minutes you mentioned that you get emails from trans people saying that they also hate the toxic online trans community and that they believe it makes their online experience worse. If you have a list of trans people who feel this way, feel free to add me to it. The people who make me feel ashamed of being trans are those toxic online trans people. They make me feel like I can deeply understand why so many conservatives despise the left. Even on Reddit, the only way I can seem to get through to radical trans people is by pulling out my trans badge, and even then they seem to tend to just ghost me afterwards. "23. I see so much straight hate from online queer communities. It almost feels like queer people have been otherized and demonized for so long that they begun to start otherizing themselves. Breaks my heart. All I want is to feel like I belong and am accepted. It upsets me so deeply to see so many voices and opinions echoed that are full of so much hate and disdain. It only serves to further divide the very people that we should be working to build relations with." 24. I'm not active in trans circles in real life anymore, and neither is my friend, even though at first we'd go to the local trans associations every week. And if you were to go to an association anywhere, you'll notice that besides a few exceptions, it's almost only questioning or early trans people that are in there. I don't think the reason is, in most cases, is that people can't vibe with uwu xenogenders. It's because that when you start transitioning, it's an explosion in your life, positive and negative. Being trans is central to your experience, always on your thoughts, etc. You need validation to be reassured, to feel that you're not alone, and also advice for admin and medical stuff. But as time goes on, it's been a few years, while you're more confident, you're now less of a trans and just a woman, or a man, or an NB. Life goes on, you don't think about it much. These places just aren't for you anymore. Also, most trans people cringe at who they were at the beginning of their transition, kind of like how you cringe at your teenage self. I think it's very easy for older, when I say older, I mean time since realizing you're trans, not just old since birth, trans people to forget how they were and just judge the behavior and insecurities of younger trans people. A lot of early trans people are very angry at society and the system because their life is shit and people are mean to them constantly in real life. Again, it's easy for passing trans women or men to look at that anger and be annoyed because, well, now we're pretty well integrated. Almost nobody knows that we're trans. They give us a bad rap. They're too mean, etc. I'm not saying there's no truth in it, but it's also because we now just want quiet and peace because we are the good ones. We look and act like the gender we are, so even if someone learns that we're trans, they'll probably react neutrally or positively. However, that's not the experience of these younger trans people. They get insulted and mocked, and they're often going through tough shit with their family. They're losing friends. We don't have the same problems they do, or even the same political interests necessarily. They want shit to change fast and drastically. We want to be more integrated and left alone. 6 more. I don't think someone has to transition medically to be transgender, but I do think there has to be some underlying discomfort with the way you're perceived and or the way your body looks. You can't just be an AFAB who puts she, they in your bio and has no desire of going any further than that and then claim to be transgender. This dilutes the meaning of the word to an absurd degree and delegitimizes us more than we already are. I also don't feel at home in most trans communities. It feels like I'm having to walk on eggshells to make sure I don't say anything that could be misconstrued as invalidating, and it's extremely mindfucky. I saw a post the other day on RMTF where someone said, "I wish I were a girl," frowny face. And while some of the comments understood what she meant and responded accordingly, there were a lot of people berating her and telling her that she couldn't be posting stuff like that and that she obviously already was a girl. Sorry. Already was a girl, and that posting anything outside of that sentiment made other people in the sub feel bad. This is reflective of a larger problem with queer people are being called out or ousted from queer communities if their language and or opinions don't 100% match with the current progressive rule book. Hesitant towards the use of neopronouns, don't say anything or risk being demonized and rejected from the community, and then have absolutely nowhere else to go because 95% of all queer communities follow pretty much the same guidelines. Same with trans sports, discussions on words like tranny, transsexual, AGP, etc., medical transition for kids, having police outside of anarcho-communism, etc., etc. Why should trans people have to tone police themselves to such an absurd degree and make sure to only use language that's fully inclusive and go out of their way to cater towards everyone's ego? These issues are messy and deserve to be discussed. Whoa, shit, These issues are messy and deserve to be discussed in a way that acknowledges that. Woke scolds across the internet, most prevalent on TikTok and Twitter in my opinion, make being trans even harder than it has to be because now I have to watch how I act and what I say, not only around conservatives, but also queer people. I want to be able to give an opinion like trans women probably shouldn't be competing in sports with cis women without some white cis ally or a dozen 14-year-old trans people telling me I'm transphobic. 26. Most people would agree that people like Shapiro and Crowder aren't helpful for trans people due to similar reasons, which I agree with. On the other hand, I personally think people like Demon Mama or maybe even Vosh nowadays are doing a similar disservice to people like me. Nowadays, you don't even need a Ben Shapiro to make trans people sound ridiculous. The online trans community is doing it for them, which is so much more frustrating to me since the harm to trans people like myself isn't as obvious anymore when lefties are advocating for neopronouns than when some conservative calls trans people mentally challenged. I personally felt the need to clarify to every person I came out to as trans that I'm not an online trans person, even though I'm mostly online and a trans person. It's exhausting. To be clear, I don't hate people like Demon Mama. I think they just aren't aware of what they're doing to some trans people and how it affects us. I don't even necessarily have a problem with people identifying with autism or as a deer in some abstract way. It is a part of their identity, and if it makes them happy, go for it. I just think it should not be under the same umbrella as gender identity and therefore treated a bit differently. I also don't like the use of the word, I don't like to use the word transphobic anymore. The term is so inflationary nowadays to the point to where anybody that disagrees with a trans person whatsoever can be called a transphobe. I have some progressive friends, and it feels kind of humiliating when they clearly don't want to talk to me about certain topics because they feel like their opinion might come off as transphobic, even though their thoughts might be reasonable. Sometimes it feels like I am left out of good conversations due to me being trans. 27 out of 31. We've almost made it, guys. I am a college student. Sorry. I've been watching your content for about a year. My best friend is a trans man, and I have plenty of other trans friends. Being active in LGBTQ plus groups at my school, I've come to learn that, for the most part, no one in real life respects the online trans activists. I'm sure you've gotten emails after emails about this recently, but I'd like to add my 2 cents. Trans men are seriously fucked over. You've mentioned this on your stream a few times, and it's true. Every issue is centered around trans women. On the right, it's because they fear that it's perverted men, etc., etc., and on the left, it's because of the way too vocal online communities. The problem is these communities claim to represent trans people, but all trans people I know want nothing to do with them. Lately, I've been talking to my trans friends about this a lot, and they feel like they're being used as a political pawn for a culture war that they didn't sign up for. It makes me depressed to see these bad faith political actors are using a group of people that already have it rough to advance an agenda. 28. I'm a 22-year-old trans female nursing student at a private religious university in the South. I'm not rich or religious. I'm only here for scholarship money. Being a private religious institution, they will not allow any official organizations for LGBT people or anybody left of Democrat. This led to the creation of an unofficial LGBT group club organized over Discord. After the original leadership of the server graduated last year, it has been taken over by the most terminally lefty-brained dumbfucks who use the word gender in practically every other sentence, who are only here because of their parents' money. Usually, I would stay away from these types of people, but it's hard finding friends who will openly associate with a trans person at a religious university. For reference, a majority of the student body doesn't agree with gay marriage, and the conservative club is functionally a Groyper club. It's extremely alienating because this is a relatively large group, and I don't feel like a single person here has the same experience with their gender as I do. They use it as an accessory that you change every few weeks instead of an identity. The other trans people don't experience dysphoria or do anything to further their transition. The only other person on HRT was a trans guy who was socially pushed out of the group for being slightly conservative. The most alienating thing, though, is when they talk in the Discord about how they want to make cis people feel uncomfortable and be more visibly trans, which both sound like nightmare scenarios to me. It's really scary to me when the people advocating for trans stuff at my school are making me, a trans person, feel almost transphobic. 2 more. I see people like Vosh, who are neither trans nor a woman, effectively meaning he is nothing more than a cis man, making misogynistic comments in the name of trans activism, or people saying maybe we shouldn't have women in sports, etc. I see it for what it is, a fucking goldmine for TERFs to capitalize on. The misogyny from Vosh is the best recruiting material in the world. It cannot be understated how good it is for them. It is the trans discourse equivalent of proof of WMDs in comparison to comments like maybe we should do away with women in sports, which is more akin to an ISIS beheading video. It does far more harm for trans women, because TERFs usually have to point to crazy or misogynistic things that trans activists say that come from people like Demon Mama, who happen to be trans, and no one can really argue that Demon Mama isn't part of an oppressed group, so there's still that discomfort because her word can be hand-waved as an oppressed person punching up, or just an oppressed person being frustrated at a perceived oppressor. Meanwhile, Vosh as a cis man is perceived to be speaking from the position of a group of people who are the facilitators of gender depression, or have been throughout history, so his words carry a lot more weight than some frustrated trans woman, because TERFs can use it and point to it as, see, men are just using trans ideology to oppress us. It is a lot easier to develop a boogeyman or an enemy when you develop a narrative that your enemy is supported by a group of people who have historically held all the power in the first place. Final email. I've been watching through the recent nonsensical trans sports debate debacle and all of the associated drama, and holy fucking shit, it is perpetually exhausting to be someone who literally just wants to vibe and be treated as a normal girl, but to have your entire existence dragged out into the open and paraded around like some sort of freak of a lost cause for a bunch of purposeless, perpetually online dipshits to group around and pat themselves on the back so hard they leave a bruise. All the while, the only feeling I ever have is like they painted a target on my forehead and kicked me out to the front of the crowd, cheering and telling me that it's for my own good, while they sit back and face none of the repercussions for the stupid shit they say or advocate for on my behalf. Honestly speaking, it feels exactly like the same shit I've always dealt with, except instead of being told I'm wrong for existing or telling me I'm a freak and that I should be cut out of my rights or cut out of consideration for my own good, I'm told that I need to shut up and let them speak for me now because they're here to save me from myself once again. You mentioned a bunch of things recently that really stood out to me and legit made me feel like, yes, someone fucking gets it. Like when you mentioned how you had the impression that trans women didn't want extra visibility or to be treated special for being trans, that the whole concept or idea was just being or becoming an average woman. And yes, absolutely, that's all I've ever really wanted. That was what most people I knew and people I know in real life felt or worked towards. I've quipped before, fuck trans acceptance, I want trans indifference, because that best reflects how I really feel about it. I want my status as trans to be one of the least important, least interesting things about me, because in my own mind it already is. A lot of these absolute specimens that you have the displeasure of talking to online, though, I notice this really huge difference in perspective that I can only really sum up as like, I wonder how many of them actually identify as woman, and how many of them identify as trans woman. It's like that old difference between a girl gamer and a gamer girl. Yeah? I feel like I'm just a woman. I identify as a woman, and that makes me trans, but for some reason for some of these people, being trans seems to deadass be the goal, and that is so fucking wild and so fucking uncomfortable for me, honestly. I'm not entirely sure how to really sum that up or apply some sort of sorting algorithm to filter these people out or differentiate them from the poor normie fucks like me who just want to vibe, but it's been something on my mind for sure. Additionally, it feels so wildly, absurdly fucking uncomfortable seeing the plethora of cis male presenting dipshits out here claiming ownership or expertise on trans discussions and dictating rules or claiming total ownership over trans positions when I just feel like, shut the fuck up. You don't speak for me. None of this affects you. You get to go home after your shitty debates and stare slack-jawed at your computer screen while I'm the one who gets thrown under the bus for all of your bullshit. It's incredibly frustrating, and it just seems to have gotten worse with time. So I'm 30 now. I originally came from old 4chan nonsense before there even was a political board. I was an edgy kid who was, like a lot of folks back then, just some social reject who liked edgy jokes and Japanese culture nonsense. I wound up finding a community there and had a bunch of fun, back when all of the stupid racism and Nazi shit was legitimately a joke, before the word got out that 4chan was full of racist Nazis and all the edgy kids making offensive jokes got lawed out of existence by mainstream dipshits, flooding in, missing the point that all the edgy shit was only funny because it was untrue. Kind of like that time you mentioned when someone took you saying faggot seriously and went, yeah, screw them gays, and you had to do a double take on, what do you mean? That's not what I meant in the slightest. Back then, the thing that really got me out of my shell was, hilariously, all of the fucking trap threads. I had considered all the trans stuff, but all the trans spaces were a bunch of ugly, bitter, 40-year-old women with hardcore sexist views on what being a woman is like. You want to play games? You want to watch anime? You want to tell jokes? Oh no, honey, that's not feminine enough. And all the needlessly exhausting drama that hasn't changed to this very day. I was deeply off-put by that, but I looked up to the traps as these fucking amazing people. They were chill, they were funny, they were cute as heck, and they just did what they liked, played games, had interest, had actual personalities. For a long time, I proudly proclaimed that I wasn't trans. I was totally a trap. But of course, times change, and so did the context of that word. Suddenly, that playful term that represented my whole identity and the things I looked up to changed, and overnight, everyone recognized it as a term of hate speech. No amount of argument was good enough. No debate could ever really be won. People argued with all these personal anecdotes about their personal fears on trans panic being used to murder them because some edgy dipshits online used the term trap, and all of my own personal fears or personal experiences didn't matter in the slightest because they didn't align with the popular narrative, you know? That was when I realized that all of the personal anecdotes and this thin veneer of protecting people's feelings or representing people's experiences or standing up for people's unique lived history was all a bunch of horse shit that nobody actually believed. It just looks nice on a resume when you're trying to fluff yourself up to look better. I gave up on that fight, and fine, whatever. I guess I'm begrudgingly under the trans label now, but that was still one of those early things that made me really put off by trans spaces. Beyond that, there's this really weird break in experiences that I feel where my perspective is informed entirely by a deep level of introspection and deconstruction. I was presented with binary options, and to arrive at the thought or feeling of being trans, I had to dig in really deep to try to take it apart so I could understand why I felt like I did. It was tough and it was scary. I made a lot of mistakes, but I got here on my own, and with that journey or process came a lot of introspection and self-awareness. Because I question everything, because I question myself, I have answers to all sorts of weird internal questions and a basis by which to reason most gender-related things. This is one of those things I find is so severely and sorely lacking from any self-avowed trans spaces these days, personally. The term that used to get tossed around a lot was hugbox, and I think that's kind of what they all inevitably became. no questioning, no introspection, no ability to just be wrong. It's just a continuous outpouring of external validation for anyone except the dumb autistic motherfuckers like me who actually ask questions. The idiots who walk in and go, "So, I don't understand this," and aren't content with, "That's just how it is," as a hand-wavy answer. I feel like the whole toxic positivity culture is doing nothing other than ruining anyone's chances of forming a reasonable, grounded sense of self. They never have a reason to. Reminds me a lot of your commentary on therapy, with the idea that if you're going to therapy for 10 years and there's no breakthrough, your therapy isn't fucking working, because the point of it should be to get you to a reasonable place where you can take care of yourself, and the same here. The point of a support community is to give you tools, perspectives, and support so you can eventually not need that support group anymore, or maybe so that you can be strong enough to support more people, but that's not what these things become. They're more like a perpetual state of endless validation that protects anyone and everyone from the horrors of even the tiniest fraction of introspection. Folks will tolerate anyone and anything, except for someone who dares ever upset the established status quo or deviate even slightly from the script. Like, goddamn, do you know how many gapes and guffaws you earn just by going, "I'm not a literal communist, actually, I'm like a sockdem at most"? Anyone that claims to be trans-inclusive, all of your thoughts, experiences, and ideas are the utmost important to us, only so long as they're things that reinforce what we already think is true. Okay. This was like it was hard to cut down which ones I wanted to keep, which ones I wanted to get rid of, but I feel like having all of these floating around in your head, at the very least, can give you some understanding of things that have shaped my perspective.